So we turn now to Virtual Lecture 6, which is the beginning of the presidency. And before we get to the presidency, which has grown exponentially in power as well and gained a larger share of the beast of the central authority, we need to look at its background. And most certainly first, though, it's part of the presidential office. It's the vice president of the United States. Let's go and have a look at that. They were quite concerned with the president turning into a Caesar general or another king or another queen or another bad guy, and so they thought that the president himself would embody the issue of autocratic dictatorial rule, something they obviously was at the forefront of their mind not to have. So they debated it a lot. Hamilton and Jefferson went back and forth on Federalist Paper 51 about the need for a commander-in-chief of the commander-in-chief who had a vice president, but not necessarily was in his the same party as the president himself, as another agitated way to control and to check and balance, because they were so concerned about the president getting too big for his particular role. And then he had unlimited terms. We didn't limit it to 2 terms until 1953. So when they wrote this thing, they did not limit the amount of terms that you could serve, and that held up by custom for about 100 years until Teddy Roosevelt tried to run in 1912 and did not make it. I just put some of these bad boy kings we've seen before that they were trying to stay away from: the hangers, the torturers, the this, that, and the other. So really, they were afraid of this morphing of the kings they knew from the past, both personally and in the history books, to Georgie Boy himself, who is probably the most iconic American there is. They were concerned that this guy could be, if he was popular enough, turn into some sort of dictatorial role, autocratic role. And you know what, he was popular enough at the time that he might have actually been able to get away with it. So we're going to see what he had to say when he served 2 terms and why he didn't serve a 3rd, even though he would have won easily. And therefore they thought the president's position should be weakened. The presidential office has grown incredibly the last many years. Why? Mainly because we're not as afraid of the president as we used to. We may not like him, but none of us are concerned he's going to come down here and throw a bunch of thugs and break down your door and haul you off to jail without habeas corpus or something like that, right? So we're not as, we may be concerned about it. Nobody's at the fear level that they were back then when they wrote this thing about the dictatorship being manifestation possibly of the president. Second, most of the Supreme Court rulings through the years that have challenged the president to be able to do this, that, or the other thing has been found in favor of the president, and some rather large ones, right? Him ability to do certain things, and with that came large amounts of power. Certainly we realize now that America is so vastly more complicated than 1781 that we have to have a living and breathing constitution that looks at this stuff every once in a while. And again, the president just ruling over a millionfold more difficult country than George Washington did his first term. So then you had, horse wagon, the wells still working, that kind of stuff. Today you have, New York City, Manhattan, the greatest manifestation of man-made buildings and living in the world. Then you had the horses as the main thing of transportation. Now we have cars going all the way up to Formula One racing. Then beach, sort of, not as many people get on the beach without a bunch of reservations or trying to plot out a spot. There was a lot of coastline and people didn't go to it very much, as opposed to this, something like this, where in fact there are too many people there. I don't see how you can even feel the water. There's so many people there. But that's a more complicated situation. If you want to make an analogy about a lifeguard, look, scenario 1, you have a lifeguard. He's got it a lot easier than this guy, constantly looking and saving people and things like that. So time's passed, no serious presidential abuse. Sort of like we're afraid of something, longer goes by before it actually happens, the less our fear, becomes. So let's look at the vice president. And there's a quote by H.L. Mencken I think we've seen before in this class, and many of you will have to read I say have to, you'll like it, in Lit 1 or 2 in college, part of your core curriculum. He's still the greatest political writer of all time. There's not even any question about his ability to turn a phrase that's not just funny, but poignant and very sophisticated in terms of what's happening in front of him political-wise. So I could lecture, if you'd like, the next 7 or 8 lectures on that conjecture, and be happy to do that for you, about why he's so weak. But Mencken did it in 12 words, I think, because he compared the vice presidency to something, and not, like a piece of grass, say, or a, somebody who's got a lot of money or power, or really anybody, even minor officials. I could do that to you, the way the construct is made, so that the vice president does have some informal advising power, but not formal. Here's what H.L. Mencken said. By the way, he looks like one of the Three Stooges, I know. What a writer, though. He said the vice presidency is worth no more than this. Take a guess what that is. A bucket of warm spit. So what a phrase. The vice presidency office is worth nothing more than a bucket of warm spit. There's something gross about him putting warm with it, isn't there? And by the way, for this lecture, I spit into this bucket for 4 days, so that I could have a picture taken with me throwing the spit around. How do you like it? Yeah, a lot of work, but it's the children, it's the students. Some of us do these things and sacrifice a lot for you, and warm spit was one of them. So let's look at the formal powers of the vice president. There was only a couple. One, he's the president of the Senate. Now that in itself is not that great, because he can only break ties. Every 4 years there's an average of only 2 bills that tie, and the vice president casts a vote. I'll bet those are usually important bills, but still, only a couple times does he actually go up as president of the Senate and be able to vote, right? So although it sounds official, really cool on your business card, it's not exactly that powerful of a role. He is in first line in succession in case the president gets assassinated or dies in office, which is a rare occurrence, indeed. Mainly because the 2 ways you would think that they would possibly pass away would be medical treatment that is so advanced today, and certainly at the yearly physical, Obama and previous presidents are just scanned from head to toe. So if there's something going on, they know that. Mr. Reagan walked out of the DuPont Hyatt Regency in '82, right out of the service entrance. And the name John Hinckley tried to assassinate him. And when I'm back in class, we'll look it up on YouTube. I'll show you the dramatic coverage of that, because somebody was filming it. But I mean, it's just like there was no guards there. You could just walk right out, right into this guy, this crazy guy who, by the way, lives in Dallas. He pled guilty to insanity and won his case. Spent about 25 years in a mental institution, criminal one. And it proved that he is sane, and now he's back. So you may run into him at North Park Mall or something crazy like that. But now you can forget pot shots. I don't think that's going to ever happen. I know when I saw Obama come to Eastfield last year, I mean, all of Interstate 30 was closed down, basically. Yeah, the entire half side of that one part of the city closed down so that nobody could have a shot at him. And I remember seeing the motorcade with like 5 or 6 black Escalades, right? And about 3, I think it was 3 presidential limousines. So if people could get the first round of defense, they would know which one he was necessarily in. So I don't think this is going to happen. And you'd think we learned our lesson after Kennedy, where I ran an open motorcade, but apparently we hadn't. By the time that Reagan walked right into John Hinckley's pistol that he bought in Dallas and shot him 3 times. But that's rare. So I don't think that we're going to have somebody die in office. I guess somebody could develop something, but I doubt that. But the security would probably preclude another president dying by violence. Now you can see who is after, if the president were to die, the vice president takes over. After that, if they both say died together, both got kicked out of office together for bribery or something, the Speaker of the House of Representatives would be the president. So we go from being a Democrat as it is now to a Republican, because we have a Republican, John Boehner, who's the Speaker of the House. The President Pro Tem of the Senate would be next. The President of the Senate is the Vice President, the Pro Temp, meaning the one that's usually there permanently, but it's temporary, which makes no sense, is the President of the Senate. So right now that's Harry Reid. Would become the new president, which would be scary as well. Then after that, Secretary of State, Treasury, these are basically, as you see them and you know, are the presidential cabinet positions that are as close as advisors as you would expect, the kind of people that would be extremely loyal to his beliefs if something were to ever happen and carry his presidency through, because his cabinet is filled of people who share his vision and certainly are politically active and would want to keep going with that stuff. And it's done in succession. So you can see here at the very bottom is the Secretary of Homeland Security was the very last one added. So theoretically, if all these people were at some big affair like the State of the Union, yeah, they do all get together, don't they? All these people, both houses of Congress, the Vice President, the President, and the Senate, and get together to listen to his speech in January in which he tries to sell his last year as the president. And it's pretty amazing the way these people have done such a great job, supposedly, and sometimes we have trouble with it. But the Secretary of Homeland Security is last. And when he gives that speech, the president picks one of these people, usually one of the lower chiefs, maybe from here on down, something like that. They pick one of these people to go into a hiding, into a safe house they have in Washington, and wait out the State of the Union in case we were somehow attacked by terrorism or by aliens or something like that. And does not emerge until after the speech is over, and just in case there was some sort of gigantic thing, we would still have a president, believe it or not. And he picks one of these people randomly, so it's kind of a little bit of a reward for being extra special to him, either personally or professionally. And there we go. So I suppose it could happen where they all go down one night. I think it would be difficult. So what the 25th Amendment did in 1967, it took a look at some of the problems we just said that were inherent with the vice presidential succession specifically. And these changes were made no surprise at all in 1967, which is probably the height of the Cold War, really, and between us and Russia and China during the Vietnam War. And so they decided they wanted the vice president to be slightly, they altered it slightly, so we'll see what it is, but it's important. So they're afraid of nuclear weapons scares without a president, so they went ahead and did. They didn't want the power vacuum, even if they had an emergency presidential election. We all know how long it would take. And so that they, unless they were to somehow get in that bunker buster in D.C., we always have a president, always, to come out of there and emerge as still the leader of the country. Well, again, because of this nuclear war, which would happen quite quick, he wanted to make sure that the vice president was more safe. So there wasn't this power vacuum. J.F. Curtis movie showed us a very, very good deal on that, because when Mr. Kennedy died, the 25th Amendment wasn't in place, so the Vice President Johnson was actually not the president for 2 years. He was the vice president acting as the president after Kennedy was shot. So here's the new provision. You made the vice president the new president as opposed to just assuming the president's role. So again, the vice president did not used to become the president. He assumed the president's powers. And that's a big difference between becoming something and just acting with the power of something else. That doesn't make you one, does it? So what the 25th Amendment does now is the vice president becomes the president. Therefore, we need a new vice president. And the way that is done is Congress agrees by the majority of the president's appointee to become president. So that's the way the new one comes in. It's happened 3 times. And we'll pick up on the rest next lecture.